All right, it's about 11:03, so we're going to go ahead and get started. 11:03 local, I should say, where I am. Welcome to everyone to Putting the Social Back in Social Media, What Charter Leaders Need to Know. We really appreciate everyone registering and joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to Kim Brader to kick us off this morning and to allow herself to introduce her, and then I'll take it from there.
Hi, everybody. This is Kim. Thanks for joining us today. We are glad that you are with us, and we're going to be spending the next hour talking about social media and the impacts of social on charter schools and how you can utilize social in terms of best practices for several things. I am the VP of Marketing at Charter School Capital, and prior to working here, I owned and ran an agency in Portland, Oregon that focused on brand and digital marketing for 15, 16 years. And that's how I got connected with Michael. So we've known each other for a long time. I am going to let Michael introduce himself, and then we will get started.
Thanks, Kim. My name is Michael Barber. I run a small agency based in Los Angeles called Barber and Hewitt. We have worked in and around charter schools for the past, or I should say I have worked in and around charter schools for the past 5 years in some marketing capacity, both working on behalf of Charter School Capital, as well as working with a few local schools in the Los Angeles area. Both Kim and myself have had the unique opportunity and lucky opportunity to present a lot of marketing related content at a variety of different state as well as national conferences throughout the charter school industry. Over the last few years, we've presented in Florida, Arizona, California's conference over the last 3 years, and at the national level over the last 3 years as well. So we really enjoy bringing this knowledge because we think it's something that charter schools can really use. For Kim for having.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that, one of the things that we'll get into today as we talk about social media is what we're seeing across the charter landscape. Charter School Capital works with charter schools across the country, and we've seen, a lot of how schools are using social media in various instances. We've served more than 550 schools and educating 650,000 students, and our company is focused on the empowering charter schools with working in growth capital and facilities financing, and we've put more than $1.5 billion into the charter movement. So we've seen a lot of what's happening on the marketing front, the digital marketing and social media, so we'll sprinkle that into our conversation today.
For sure. Along with that content, today's agenda over the next 60 or so minutes is why this matters. So why spend the next 60 or so minutes with us talking about social media? We're going to look at by the numbers, so give you an idea across the landscape where people are spending their time when it comes to social media, particularly where both your advocates, students, parents, and teachers may be spending their time. Let's talk to you about how you can utilize social media from an engagement perspective, right? How do you go engaging different audiences that may be on social media or on different social media platforms? Then we'll talk a little bit about listening. Obviously, one of the things that schools can do is listen to what's happening in their communities, what's happening at an advocacy level, at a legislative level, as well as listen for security purposes and for student safety purposes, right? So there's a variety of things that we can do from a social media perspective there. If we have time, we'll touch really briefly on how you can leverage social media from both a personal as well as a student development perspective. For any of the teachers that may be in the room or those that are advising teachers, we'll touch on a couple practices there. We're going to try and keep that section limited because it can get really in-depth, and we want to be able to get to 2 other sections that we're going to touch on, which are some best practices to think about as it relates to social and a little bit of digital as well. And give you some examples. So we've pulled together specific examples within the chart of different things, video to Facebook to different channels, so you can see how other schools may be leveraging all of these different places that you can do from a social media perspective. As usual, these, as well as a recording of this webinar, are available to you within about an hour to an hour and a half after we wrap up at the top of the hour. We will get the slides posted, and as well as a recording of this conversation posted to our website, or should I say Charter School Capital's website, That website is charterschoolcapital.org/webinars. You'll find, along with this session, a variety of different pieces and different webinars that Charter School Capital does around the industry, anything from growth capital, growth strategy best practices, and facilities opportunities and facilities best practices. There's a number of different webinars there. If this social digital topic is something of importance to you, we have done this presentation before with a few different nuances, as well as a webinar in the past called Digital Marketing 101. There's a wee bit different content around different digital marketing tactics in that one if you'd like to take a look. So that's the agenda for the next 60 or so minutes.
I'd like to also add, Michael, that for those of you who would like to ask questions, please do. We'll try to answer them as we go through. Use the questions tab on the control panel, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. If we don't get to your question during today's presentation, we'll follow up with you after the webinar.
Yeah, for sure, and both Kim and my contact information is included in both the introductory slide that you saw a second ago, as well as one of the last slides in the session. Feel free to reach out to either one of us if you've got questions that you don't get answered or would like to take offline. We're more than happy to make ourselves available for that discussion. Okay, so let's get started. So why spend the next 60 or so minutes with us? This really comes down to the moments and how people are making decisions when it comes to what they do online. Google calls this idea micro moments, or micro moments where we make decisions as people to buy things, to solve unexpected problems, to pursue big goals, to find out how to fix something, or to make educational decisions. And what we know is that there are a lot of parents as well as students that are going online and finding information about what schools are doing, what schools are doing differently, how they are addressing needs within their communities. Almost 80% of people's journeys online start within that search bar, and then the things that they're going to are pretty numerous. They can find things on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and learn about all these different things that schools may or may not be doing, both the good and the bad, right? And so these are those moments when people are making those decisions of whether they're going to send their student, or if they're a student themselves, looking for schools that may address a need that they're having, such as an educational focus, right? Theater, arts, science, something along those lines, or potentially flexibility in their schedules, online schools, and those types of opportunities, so that they can find different things that may address their needs. These moments are really why social matters, because it used to be, if you asked Kim and I this question, 6 or 7 years ago, where does a school need to be? You really just needed a website. You needed to optimize that website for a couple key terms so that people in your community could find you, and that was really it. Google said, 7 or 8 years ago, that people looked at somewhere between about 5 and 6 different points of reference or points of information. Today, that number hovers somewhere between 11 and 13. In other words, people go out online and they're looking at review sites, they're looking at social media, they're looking at your website, they're looking at all these different points of information, and that's really why it's important to discuss this topic, because if your school is, making a difference in the community, making a difference to students, is distinctive in a certain way, you need to be able to talk about that and show it through a variety of the channels where people are getting their information sources these days. It's also important because all that content that you're sharing out there, it's all shareable, it's all snackable, and it can all be utilized in 15 ways till Sunday. From video to text to all the content that we're sharing, it's really important to understand that these things can be shared anywhere, good news, bad news, or indifferently. Social is important because it can spread like wildfire, good or bad. It's an opportunity for schools to talk about themselves. It's an opportunity for also areas where you can receive feedback, negative and positively, right? And the ability to listen into those conversations, to be able to amplify those conversations, are all things that you can do via social media. Anything to add, Kim?
No, I think that covers it. Good intro.
Great. So the next section, we wanted to give you some idea around the numbers. In other words, where are people spending their time these days? We'll start with what we call the usual suspects, and that's Facebook. Facebook is sort of the behemoth in the room. It is the behemoth in the room. As you can see from the numbers here, 1.7 billion users, active users per month are now on the Facebook platform. But Facebook isn't just Facebook.com or the Facebook app. They also own WhatsApp, which has 1 billion users on it, and you're starting to see brands, organizations, and schools utilize WhatsApp to communicate with students and parents. They also obviously own Messenger, which they've created almost a standalone product around. And 1 billion people are interacting on Messenger on a monthly basis as well. And of course, they acquired Instagram several years ago, and that's had a really big impact on Instagram in terms of driving numbers for that platform. Almost 500 million and growing active users on that platform per month. So Facebook's sort of the behemoth in the room, if you will, certainly an area where charter schools at least need to have a base. The big changes as it relates to Facebook are this. The organic, or if you will, the free reach that you get from Facebook is a lot less than it used to be. All of these platforms have to make money these days, and unless you've got a really rabid fan base, it's certainly a pay-to-play model, if you will. In other words, Facebook is allowing brands and schools alike to amplify, if you will, or pay for their stories, whether those are text or images or videos, to get amplified within the newsfeed or the area where you get all of that Facebook information, if you will. And so certainly, although the active user numbers are growing on Facebook and it shows no signs of slowing down, this is definitely a different environment that schools need to understand that you may not be seeing as much engagement on your Facebook fan page these days, largely because you've got to be paying for that engagement. That being said, to pay for those things is not too terribly complicated. Facebook's done a really good job of helping organizations amplify their content, and it's also not too terribly expensive depending upon what you're doing and sort of your goals and objectives. But certainly still the biggest player in the room, and one that keeps bringing people back. Amongst most of the social networking channels, Facebook does a really good job of ensuring that people are very addicted to coming back to the platform on a regular basis.
So one thing I would add to that, Michael, is that if your school is not engaged on any of these platforms yet, go and actually get yourself signed up and make sure that you own your school's name. You know, a lot of different schools can have similar names, and you want to make sure at the very least that you're able to have a presence when you're ready to have a presence if you don't already have one. I've seen many schools who don't have a presence yet and didn't know that they should actually go and claim their presence on these various social platforms.
Yeah, it's a really important point. You don't have, excuse me, you don't have to have an active profile per se, quote unquote. You can just go reserve your name so that at least you own that brand name, something that's really important for, you know, year zero schools or year one, right, as you're beginning to build out all these different places that you can communicate with parents, students, advocates, and the greater community. So even if you're not thinking about being on one of these platforms, it's really important, as Kim said, is to go out and claim, if you will, your brand name or your school name or your organization's name so that it doesn't get taken by somebody else. Super good point. The second place we wanted to talk about was YouTube. So why YouTube? It doesn't necessarily sort of feel like a social network unless you're really into the comments, which tend to be areas where I don't like to spend a lot of time. But YouTube is vitally important for two reasons. One, the amount of video that people are consuming these days is going through the roof. It's exponential growth. This is driven by the fact that most people have access to smartphones these days. They also have, the smartphones are getting bigger and better screens, and so people are spending a lot of time consuming video online. And so it becomes a place where schools can really tell their story and do it in a really unique way. Particularly the example that you're seeing on the left-hand side here comes from Success Academies. If you're looking sort of for a case study of somebody who does video well on YouTube, they are certainly a great one to go take a look at. The second core reason is just the growth and the saturation and the usage of YouTube. It has over 1 billion users. 1/3 of all the people on the internet are on YouTube at some point during the month. It's also what we like to call the second biggest search engine in terms of number of searches that people are doing online. at least globally when you take out China out of the equation. It is the second largest search engine, meaning that behind Google, where people go to search for information, like how do I fix my refrigerator, or what school in Phoenix, Arizona is focused on science education, that's where people are going to ask those questions or seek those types of insights. So if your school is doing something unique or different, and you can bring that to life in video, it is certainly a place where you're going to want to place that content. Also, when you consider from demographics, the type of individuals that are leveraging YouTube are really some of the core audiences that schools are going after, right? Parents, students alike. It crosses a lot of those demos. And just in terms of usage, as I mentioned before, usage along video has been just exponentially rising. The number of people that are watching YouTube videos is up year over year over year and continues to grow. And the amount of time they're spending on YouTube is just fascinating. In other words, just the watch time that people are looking at their phones and being on YouTube continues to go up year over year. So it's certainly a place that if you haven't already started to look at as a potential opportunity, it's certainly a place that you can build out content. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be doing what Success Academies is doing here, right? YouTube, they're spending, probably a good healthy budget on producing what are, stunningly beautiful videos, interviewing their kids and getting an idea of what their school's about. But YouTube can be a place where you host video content, whether it's, sort of professionally made, if you will, and done by a videographer like Success here, or it's just a place where you can house, some of the short video or video that you're doing on a mobile phone within YouTube itself. It's also a great place that if you need to be able to host a video so that you can have it play on your website or on your blog, for any organization that wants to set that up, it's 100% free to have a YouTube or Google account where you can now host that video and then actually place it within your website so that it can play on your website without having to pay for some third party to host that video. So a lot of different opportunities here as it relates to the industry, and certainly a place where you can drive opportunities to connect with students, either current students or prospective students and parents alike.
One thing that I've seen across many charter schools as well for YouTube is that schools are recording their meetings that are happening, PTSA or PTA meetings or certain meetings where they can take that content and then spread it more broadly across their parent community. It's really difficult to get lots of parents to attend, the PTA meetings or any kind of meetings that have relevant information for parents. And so using YouTube and videoing, and it doesn't have to be a professional video. I mean, really, it can be a simple iPad setup or even a mobile phone setup. And they're capturing those meetings, and then they're posting them to YouTube, and parents have access to what happened during the meeting.
Yeah, that's a great point. The next usual suspect is Twitter. So I've got a chart in front of you that sort of shows Twitter's growth over the last few years, at least through Q4 of last year, right up through December. And the point of this graph is to show you that growth has really stagnated. So Twitter for the last few years has kind of hovered around 300 million active users. And it's really become an area where schools can have certainly the ability to spread their content. But for a number of reasons, Twitter has really struggled to grow over the last few years. And certainly we're not seeing as much engagement when we look at what schools are doing, as well as what our brands and other organizations that we work with are doing. So why is this happening? There's a lot of arguments out there. It may not be essential, right? It's not an essential tool that people are coming back to on a day-to-day basis. It's a bit of an echo chamber. In other words, it's become less collaborative, people exchanging ideas and having healthy dialogue. We've obviously seen a lot of changes, driven by the political climate over the last few years. Certainly has changed things as it relates to, building dialogues in Twitter. Low interaction. There's just a lot of listening that goes on Twitter. In other words, you have a lot of users who just follow people, sports stars, celebrities, just to follow to see what they're doing versus actually engaging with those individuals. And so those types of people don't get a lot of opportunity to understand, like, how do I engage on Twitter? And it's really become more of a listening place, if you will. There is certainly an argument to be made that there is a lot of bullying and a lot of negativity, if you will, or negative conversations that happen on Twitter, largely because of a lot of the anonymous aspects that the platform brings. And that's something Twitter is trying to address as rapidly as a problem, but it continues to have those sorts of issues and certainly turns away a lot of people because of that issue. Stagnant user growth, right? You want to, as a marketer or as a school, fish where the fish are. And Twitter has certainly not been that place to go look for either prospective students or parents alike because they just may not be there and not be very interested in being there or connecting with you there. And there's an argument to be made for that it's kind of hard to use. You can sort of figure out how to use Facebook and Instagram fairly well and fairly easily, but Twitter, the idea of replying and what's a direct message and what's a shortened URL, all of these things are a bit foreign to non-technical users and certainly presents the ability for users to understand how the platform works as easily as, say, a Facebook or a competing platform. Now, is this the end of Twitter? Who knows? There's been a lot of conversations of Twitter getting bought and folded up into another organization. But if you're considering sort of where you want to focus your time and effort, Twitter may be one where you simply just have a profile and you share news and things of that nature, or it may be a place where you just connect with a certain audience. Certainly with local media and news relations, it could be a place to connect with local journalists and national journalists or those that are focused on educational topics so that when they're looking for story angles or they are talking about the charter school, the industry itself, that we can help support that conversation because the media still is rabid Twitter users. But you're going to want to have specific goals around any one of these places. And I think with Twitter, if you're going to be considering of where you're spending your time, be really specific about what it is that you're doing on these platforms, particularly this one, because it may not serve some of the purposes that your school needs.
So I'd add to that from a Twitter use perspective, that if your school, any of your leadership or whoever's managing the marketing, if you're attending any of your state association conferences or the National Charter Schools Conference, that's a really good place to start to get a little bit of presence on Twitter for your school and be part of a conversation that is more charter movement oriented versus something specific about your school. That's one way that I've seen a lot of the charter schools that we work with utilize Twitter. But from a standpoint of communicating with your direct community and your parents and your students, Facebook is definitely a better use of time if you had to choose between the two.
Agreed. Okay, Instagram, also a usual suspect at this point, and really an area where we've seen a lot of growth as it comes to schools. First things to consider is just the amount of people that have joined Instagram in the last few years. You've gone from a relatively small social media platform at like 150 to 200 million users, almost up to 500 million in a pretty short time frame. One thing that you can do on Instagram that I think benefits a lot of schools and them being able to tap into different places is utilize a lot of tags and hashtags, because that helps place a lot of the content that you're sharing within Instagram within places where people can discover that content. There's also a lot of new features that make it easy to use, particularly if you are managing a school's account or multiple schools' accounts. One of those new features being the ability to have multiple different accounts managed under one app. It used to be you had to sign in, sign out. You can now manage up to 5 different Instagram accounts all within one Instagram app, if you will, install on your phone. They've also rolled out some new features to compete against some of the other newer social media networks out there, like Snapchat. What Snapchat is known for is those sort of 15-second video clips. Instagram's rolled this out in the sense of stories. If you are an avid Instagram user, you will notice that at the top of Instagram these days is these little circles with the profile icons at top. People can take little snippets through their day, and organizations can take little videos or still images and share them via those stories as well. Instagram's also done a really good job of adding additional sort of ways to create content that keep people engaged. So beyond just images and videos, they have 2 separate apps that are standalone as well as now built into the Instagram app called Boomerang and Hyperlapse. Boomerang creates almost like an animated GIF. It takes a series of shots very quickly so that you can create almost like a GIF-like effect that you can share. And hyperlapse allows people to video long periods of time and then shorten that so that you get a sort of hyper-fast video, if you will. One of the sort of tests that I use to know if these platforms are starting to sort of break through different demographics is what I call the mom test. When my mom asks me, hey, how do I get on Instagram or how do I use this? I know we're sort of past the technical marketing, early adopters phase, and my mom has started asking about Instagram and uses it for one of her dog rescue groups that she volunteers for. So we are past that threshold, if you will, or getting into some of those demographics. When you start to poke through that, you will see a lot more adoption, and certainly you're starting to see that happen over the last few months and last year or so. Area where a lot of schools are tapping into internet memes. You've seen things like the Ice Bucket Challenge, as well as a few other ones over the last few years, and schools have been tapping into those memes and sharing them on Instagram as well. Anything to add there, Kim?
I think that, just in terms of how schools are using Instagram, it really is about the visual. And I've seen some interesting things. Some schools are looking at Instagram as a way to connect with the students and the community. So, inviting students to participate and show things that are going on within the schools, giving a greater authenticity or being really authentic about, what the kids are doing and how that's impacting their education. And it's been, what I've seen has been really positive. I think it's also a really good way to catalog other things that are going on, in the art classes, in the science classes, in, any classes that have some real visual components to them. It just can boost both for the community that you serve, but also allows a look into the school for those who are prospective enrollees to the school.
Yeah, great ad. Another usual suspect is LinkedIn. If you're not familiar with LinkedIn, largest professionally oriented social network, 400 million users per month, only about 25% of those are active. Probably not a place where you're going to want to spend a ton of time building out a lot of followers when it comes to looking for new students and parents, but certainly an opportunity to look for additional advocates that may serve your school, whether it's looking for potential teachers, because most teachers are on LinkedIn these days, potentially to build thought leadership right for your school, being able to share content on Instagram. Look for opportunities like finding new board members or connecting with community leaders so that information can be shared. Also LinkedIn Pulse, which is, if you will, sort of like the news feed or content feed of LinkedIn, is a really great place to share and distribute professionally oriented content. So if you have teachers and or staff who are building procedures and processes that have helped change your school for the positive, it could be a place to share that kind of content so that you can build thought leadership and authenticity around your school itself. But again, certainly not a place where you're probably looking for students and parents, but certainly a place to look for other audiences that you care about as a school, potential board members, cultivating those board relationships, government officials, news, media relations, and again, an area where you can share content that your school may be doing. Anything to add there, Kim?
No, I think that the LinkedIn is interesting. It isn't really something that I've seen used by the students per se, but it's definitely something where you're using for professional development or for the teachers. But I haven't seen it done, but there's probably a way to connect LinkedIn usage to those that you may be targeting as prospective parents of enrollees. I haven't seen a school do that yet, though. So it is a good way to keep in touch and keep in part of the conversations with the state associations. A lot of the state associations have groups that are within LinkedIn, so being part of those conversations is a good thing. The National Alliance has a group, and I know several of the larger state associations do as well.
Great. So Some new kids on the block, or NKOTB, as you see in the top left-hand corner of your screen, one of those being Snapchat. Snapchat is the fastest growing social network if we consider user growth month over month. If you're not familiar with Snapchat, this is essentially what the platform allows you to do, as you're seeing the video on the left-hand side. It allows you to have 15-second stories directly shared with your friends, or placed within your story, if you will, that lasts for 24 hours. On Snapchat, you're able to leverage a bunch of different filters, like the one you're seeing on your left-hand side, so they use things like geolocations. You can also, as a school, create your own filter, which we've started to see a few schools do, so that students, parents, and the school alike can have a specific filter that's geo-targeted to where their school is located, so that if anybody's sharing content from the school, they can swipe over and have these filters or these graphics that sit on top of their videos. The usage stats around Snapchat are pretty phenomenal. 400 million snaps per day, 8 billion video views per day. And I used the mom test again for this, and she just asked a few days ago, what is Snapchat? And my response was, I'm not going to tell you, figure that out for yourself. But certainly a place, this is a place that's growing, particularly in a demographic that schools likely care about, and that's in those sort of younger student age-related demos. The growth in sort of the 11 to 18-year-old range and 18 to 22 is pretty significant. Beyond that, you're not seeing those sort of similar growth stats beyond that sort of age demo. So from a parent perspective, probably something you're not targeting, but kids are using this platform and they are using it rapidly, and it's becoming their place for not only just the content that their friends are sharing, but it's becoming the place where they get their news. You know, they've grown up in an environment that's driven around short video and short segments, and they are utilizing it to get, to learn what's happening in their world, and certainly an opportunity to at least potentially connect with students, or at least show that you're there and be showing off some of the things that may be happening from at your school, whether it's daily lunches, whether it's events that you're doing at the school, whether there's certain activities or field trips or something along those lines. Certainly a unique way that schools could potentially connect with students. Again, you don't necessarily have to be using this as a school, but I would recommend that schools go out and at least claim their branded name, so that should you decide to leverage it, at least you've got the ability to do so at a later date. Snapchat has recently been in the news because they just went public and are now a publicly traded company. So you're probably going to be seeing, just in the sense that the news is talking about them, you may see some bump in user growth, and you're going to see them rolling out net new features that may make it even more applicable for brands and schools alike to be there. One to consider is Medium. Medium was founded by one of the original founders of Twitter. They are trying to be the place where people develop and share really in-depth content related to their industry. And particularly education-related content has really grown exponentially over the past few years on Medium. There are a number of what they call channels that either educators or schools alike can follow to find out what people are doing within different industries. In education themselves, one of those channels is called Bright. It's one of the more popular educational-related channels. Inside on Medium, you've got anywhere from both charter and education thought leaders that are sharing content on what's happening in the space, and certainly a place where schools could be publishing things that they're doing in their schools differently that are helping students. The last one that we're going to share that's kind of a new kid on the block, although has been around for a few years, but is definitely getting some more attention, is Great Schools, and that's greatschools.org. Obviously not something you would think traditionally as a social network, but any of the places where people are sharing content and talking about your school, online could be defined as a social network, and certainly Great Schools is a place where those conversations are happening. If you're not familiar with Great Schools, essentially what it allows anybody to do is to go search by city, zip code, address, or school name and find rating, reviews, and commentary on that school. And certainly there are schools that are utilizing this tool to their benefit that have got great recommendations. And then there's schools on the flip side of that that are having to mitigate potential negative conversations that are happening around around their schools on this platform. So if you're not actively looking at this platform, probably a place to go and make sure that you've got a presence so that at least you can have a conversation should there be a positive and or negative review. So another place that schools can certainly participate in conversations that are happening online.
Yeah, this is a really important one, I think, because it's set up as a tool for parents to find the schools based on criteria in their search. It also is a place where people can leave reviews. And so if a school is not engaging on this platform, you may be there anyway, right? So it's really important to check out and see if your school is there if you're not already active on Great Schools, and actually see what is there, and then start to get active. Answer any of the questions that people have. When parents are going out to seek information for what programs are available in their area, Great Schools has done a really good job of being the go-to resource. And so rather than trying to create your own connection directly with parents who are searching for that information, go to the source that is already being used, which is Great Schools, and actively engage there. So Michael, we had one question I thought we'd pause and answer. I thought it was an interesting one. So someone is asking, between Instagram and Snapchat for a charter school, what would be the first choice? And so it'll be interesting to hear. We can both answer that question. I would say Instagram, but my first answer would be depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like, what's the objective? And I'll let you answer the question as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a case to be made, I think, based on the objective, but if I was just going to give a gut answer, it's going to be Instagram, largely because different audiences that schools care about, parents, students, teachers, advocates, alike, are all on that platform, whereas Snapchat tends to skew significantly younger. And also you're starting to see this conversation happen that because Instagram has copied a lot of the features of Snapchat, that Snapchat may be just not the place where people are spending as much time. At the end of the day, all we have is time as humans, right? So, if I can do the same things and share the same content that I would on Snapchat that I could on Instagram, and I've already been there for a few years, and I kind of get the platform, and it doesn't feel as like young and as Snapchat does, then a lot of people are gravitating back to Instagram for that reason. So I would say my gut answer is Instagram, but again, that probably come down to if you're focused on building relationships with students, then that may be slightly different because a lot of those students are probably picking Snapchat over Instagram at this point. But there's also an argument to be made that maybe they would not want to interact with their school on that platform either.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about how you can use social and engagement together. Keep in mind, one thing that's really important to understand, it's that social is more than just a presence, right? So we've made this recommendation that you should at least have these profiles. But social only really works when you actually engage, right? So, the definition of being social is a one-to-one or a one-to-many communication experience, if you will. So if you've got your profiles and you're sharing content, you've got to be, willing to engage with those different audiences. This requires maintenance and interaction with students, parents, and the greater community. It requires cultivating that engagement, right? Sharing content that people are sharing that maybe other schools or in different states, or what the advocacy groups are sharing or the state groups are sharing, right? And being able to just not only just be there, but also cultivate a lot of the conversations that are happening. Keep in mind, this is a two-way conversation, right? So how do you go about doing and cultivating that two-way conversation, right? And driving those conversations. Things like sharing updates of what students are doing in the classroom. One of the stories that I've shared during a couple of these webinars is we had a school leader come up to Kim and I after a session and said something that we found particularly interesting, is that parents almost have to forego the question of what did you do at school today, because they can see what students are doing by simply following schools and seeing what those schools are posting online. It almost augments the conversation that may or may not be happening at the dinner table. Certainly can keep families more engaged by providing upcoming dates on events like PTA meetings or school board meetings or something along those lines, and or potentially for teachers to connect with parents and show off things that maybe due in the next few weeks and help students sort of augment some of the learning that they may be getting in the classroom. It's also an opportunity to participate in global stories or cultural things that are happening or challenges, as you're seeing the Highmark School here doing the mannequin challenge, something you saw a lot of students participate in. There's also been different educational related campaigns or global challenges. One such thing happened on Twitter where students were challenged to create a tower as tall as they could with a certain number of sheets of paper, and then a bunch of classrooms and students shared. One student built a tower that was 70 inches tall using just 20 inches of paper and getting it to stand up. So being able to participate in some of these opportunities really helps connect not only your school to students, but connect those students to a larger global community that they may not understand or appreciate or get access to for any number of reasons online. I would recommend that anything that schools do, you tie it to a goal, right? So it's one thing just to do these activities, but tie them to a goal, right? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to generate student enrollment and retention? Are you trying to develop teachers? Are you doing fundraising? Are you doing school awareness, or what we would call brand awareness at a marketing level? It could be any or all of these, or just one of them that you're trying to do in social, but pick those goals and those objectives so that you can measure against them and figure out if it's the things you're doing are really making an impact for those goals. Just keep in mind that social isn't free, right? If a school has a phone or a teacher or a board member or a number of teachers have, or charter school leaders have, the technology, it's not free. This requires time, resources, and the ability to create this content and nurture it and be engaged. You're going to have to find a healthy balance of both, particularly as the school matures, if you will. Year 0 to year 3 schools are going to be focused on developing educational standards, focusing on creating their sort of unique position within the marketplace. They're not going to have a lot of time for marketing efforts. So what can you do that'll have the biggest impact for those, right? And then as you mature and you have the ability as a school to invest in marketing or communication resources, is how do you go about doing that so that you can share more content and you can develop bigger, if you will, or better things like, sort of the video example that you saw earlier from Success Academy. But this isn't free, right? The ability to engage and create a two-way conversation takes time and or potentially time and money. Listening. So along with engaging, social media offers a ton of opportunity for schools to listen to a variety of different groups that they may be wanting to tap into. You can listen to your peers, right? You can follow other schools and see what they're sharing, see what their teachers are doing. You can listen to advocates, right? Both government elected officials or the National Alliance or your local state organizations. What are they advocating on behalf? How are they supporting things like National School Choice Week or National Charter School Week, and being able to participate in those conversations? And it's also an opportunity to see what parents and students are doing in the community as well. And certainly offers a unique perspective into the day-to-day lives of your students that you may not otherwise have just because they may be only spending a certain amount of hours or time at your school, depending upon how the school's structured. It's also an opportunity to listen for feedback, right? Great Schools is a place to rate and review schools. Any one of these social media places is a place where you could get both a positive and negative engagement with a fan advocate or student or parent alike, right? To get that feedback, be able to understand that feedback and process it. It can also work from a risk identification or security perspective. There is a lot of bullying and issues that happen across these social media profiles, and there are schools that are taking a very interesting tack on listening to certain keywords that may be around the schools or following students that they may have concerns about to ensure that that bullying isn't extending out of the classroom into a digital environment. Certainly an opportunity to listen to advocates or local influencers and see how they're talking about the community. Particularly just as a very recent example, and I'm not trying to get political here by any stretch of the imagination, just sharing one. There has been a lot happening within the both LA and Greater California market as it relates to a lot of the changes at the National Department of Education level. And there's been coalescing around both those that are charter advocates and those that are not online. And certainly an opportunity to listen to see how people are skewing these conversations or how we're generating conversations around positive opportunities as it relates to charters. And certainly an opportunity to see what people are saying out in the marketplace so you can understand conversations that you may have to have with parents and students given what's happening in our world at the moment. Certainly an opportunity to listen to student or teacher things that they're sharing, and trends, right? Tapping into internet memes or global cultural opportunities that schools can to help the world feel a little bit more smaller for the school and the students alike.
So one thing I would add to that is that, some schools may not have deployed any social media activities at all, right? So where do you start? I would say start with the listening piece. You don't have to get onto some of these platforms and immediately be engaging, every hour of every day. You can get on there and start listening and see what is being discussed and how you can engage with some of the audiences before you dive in and actually become more engaged in the platform.
Yeah, that's a great add, Kim. There are ways to make listening easier as well as any of the tactics that we're suggesting here, like engaging. Obviously, following people, easiest way to see what people are saying or what other brands or peers and colleagues alike are saying. A variety of, in any shape and form, whether you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you're able to create groups or lists. Hashtags are one place where you can see a lot of conversations that are happening around charter schools, particularly the hashtag all one word charter schools, all one word charter schools, all one word educational choice, or school choice. Those are really popular hashtags that people use or organizations use when we're talking about this particular topic. And there's tools that'll make this a lot easier, and we're going to touch on those a little bit later. So we have some suggestions for tools as well. And we're going to flow right into those tools. One of those is Hootsuite. Hootsuite is what we would call a freemium product, so free for a certain number of accounts, and then you have to pay a minimal monthly fee to utilize it. But what Hootsuite does is it allows you to bring in all the conversations from all your different profiles across Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram right into one dashboard to be able to manage that content both inbound and outbound. So receiving the conversations that are happening, searching for hashtags, searching for keywords, pushing out content through those channels. They have both what's called a web app, if you will, that you just use your browser to manage. They also have a mobile app so that you can take images or share things or monitor things on the go. So that's Hootsuite. Starts free for a certain number of accounts and then gets just a nominal per monthly fee. I think about $10 a month for as many accounts that you're managing. Great tool for schools that may have a multi-location setup that they need to be able to manage all in one place. Buffer app is another great app that does a lot of this scheduling as well as the ability to look and source information. One of the things that I think Buffer does extremely well, one of the features that you get with Buffer is that it's sort of a guessing game, especially at the beginning, when is the best time, if you will, to publish content. What Buffer does is begins to understand when you get the most clicks or retweets or engagements around your content, and then they will go ahead and schedule that based on that timing and what they learned. There's some machine thinking happiness happening in the background that allows them to customize when they're going to actually send out your tweet or send out your image and things of that nature. Canva is a really great, simple tool to utilize to create graphics, to edit images, to put text over images. It is 100% free unless you want to buy some of the different images that you want to utilize, but you can load up your own images, use your own fonts, create really interesting little pieces of content that you can share, and they size everything perfectly for the social network. So they'll make a Facebook version that's a square that's 800 by 800 pixels. They'll make an Instagram version that's appropriate. They'll make whatever they think is best for Twitter. All the sizes are there. Sort of a really easy Photoshop, if you will. So if you've got someone in front office staff that's helping to create these images or share them, Canva is a really simple tool to utilize so that you can make nice little graphics and things of that nature that can be shared within your social media profiles. Again, free unless you want to buy certain images or certain fonts or certain backgrounds, and then it's a nominal fee, like $1 or a certain number of credits to utilize those images. But if you've got your own images, you can upload them, layer them over text, and size out all these different things that you can do on social right within Canva. Because we've only got about 5 to 10 minutes left, Kim and I are going to skip this personal and student development, but there's a whole section in here of what you can use social media to do learning opportunities through Twitter or Instagram, how you can leverage, experts in museums to augment a lot of learning. You're going to get these slides, as I mentioned before, so if that's something that you're wanting to help students or help train teachers on and how they can leverage social to do training in the classroom. There's 3 pages in there that has just some best practices and some examples of what teachers have done in the past. But we want to make sure you get the best benefit out of this content, so we're going to skip over those slides. The next section is best practices, right? So what do you do to make sure that you're doing things from start to finish in the best way possible? We've got sort of a 6-step plan, if you will, of what you can do to help make sure that you're leveraging social as well as digital media in the appropriate way. The first rule, if you will, or best practice is that you need a hub, and that's your website. So it's one thing to be participating in social, but at the end of the day, your website is also a really key player in your social media activity, because you're usually sending people, from something you're sharing on social into your website, especially if you're utilizing this from a student retention and acquisition opportunity, right? Some things to think about as it relates to that website. There are a number of great tools out there for either year 0 or year 1 schools, as well as those that are maturing. Squarespace, WordPress, Wix are all beginner sort of tools, if you will, that you can utilize to build your website. All offer both free and paid templates or different plans, depending upon how much you want to invest. And all utilize what we call is a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get, sort of Microsoft Word style editor would be the best way to describe it. So you would need limited technical knowledge. There are also a variety of tools out there that you'll see at any one of the charter school state as well as national conferences. Kim and I are not in the business of being advocates of those, because they're all private companies that you're going to have to spend some money with. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of schools that are using those platforms as well. We don't have any opinion, good or bad. They're out there. They're well known. You will see them at any one of the conferences, and certainly probably been approached by them. They all have different feature set, but if you're looking just for a core website builder, these are some good suggestions to think about. As you think about what you want related to that website, some important questions to think about. Design, what does it look like? What colors can you use? What text? How do you make it feel like your school? Does the website look like a template, or is it original rights? So any one of those tools that we mentioned before allows you to make different template changes, different style changes, use the fonts that are in your logo, use the colors within your logo, right? So with any one of those platforms, take them and customize it so it looks and feels and exudes the brand that your school is going after, right? If your school is more, very professionally orientated and on the sciences and math, maybe you want to skew towards a certain color set, a certain language and tone. But if it's more fun and theatrical and arts-based, maybe that's a different color set, different set of fonts, different sort of copy and tone feel to it. Content, is it fresh and interesting? And does it get updated on a regular basis? Google does care about this. If you're in the business of just setting and forgetting your website, it doesn't do you any good from a search perspective. Google's looking for fresh and relevant content on a regular basis. They're able to scrape all billions of the World Wide Web and trillions of pages, usually about every 4 to 6 hours at this point. So when you're putting up new, then Google's going and seeing that almost right away. Technology also really important from a search perspective. Does it work properly? Does it load? And does it load quickly? Because we live in a mobile-first environment, Google and the likes as Facebook as well appreciate websites that load very fast. So those of you that may be using just the $5.95 per month plan with GoDaddy might be seeing some issues as it relates to search results because of the fact that your website isn't loading as fast as possible. So consider investing in tools that will make it load faster. Interactivity, right? Do you offer things that present information in different ways, from text to video to photos to hyperlinks? All that interactivity matters as well. And ease of use. Is it easy to use, easy to navigate? Can people perform a search? These are all things that you should be considering when you're looking at your website. Keep in mind that social is not a dumping ground, right? This isn't a place to just dump content, right? Be selective of what you push out there. And not everything deserves to be everywhere, right? Utilize the social networks for what they're good at. If it's a sort of terrible image, then maybe it shouldn't be on Instagram, right? If it's a video, leveraging those in the places where video is working well is particularly important. And customize that content to the individual platforms, right? So if an 800 by 800 pixel image works well in Facebook, that's what you should be using. Just make sure that you're using the right content in the right place. Number 3, quality over quantity. This is the number one question we always get, is how often should we post? And there is no right answer here. This really depends on how rabid your fan base is for your content. But do one of 3 things: educate, connect with people, or raise money, right? Those are the things you're trying to do. Have a goal around these things. anything that you should put out there should do one of those three things so that the audience feels like there's value there. And be conscious that you share as much as your content, right? This is the I give as much as I take scenario, if you will. So as much content as you're putting out, go to peers, go to advocates, comment on theirs, share their content as well. It's a give and take scenario. You will see, good uptick in followers and fans when you're sharing things or advocating other people's content as well. Number 4, leverage your best assets, which is your students. Consider potentially putting a student advocacy group together where you could pull together, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, or 20 students that can create content on your behalf. Yes, I know that sounds scary, but if you do it in a really unique way, such as the example we're going to share with you, it can be really beneficial for your school. One of the biggest resources is what content we create, what resonates with our students, what resonates with our groups. And I think Georgetown, although at the university level, has done something a few years ago that's been replicated really well, both at the charter level and also throughout the public education system, from elementary all the way through collegiate level schools. They gave students tools, phones, cameras, GoPros. They asked for them to provide one piece of content per month and then to leverage that content within their own social media profiles. What came of that was this, which is called Georgetown Stories. So they actually gave 20 students a GoPro, an iPhone, a camera, and said, just give us one piece of content a month and share about your experience that's happening at Georgetown. The content that they got was incredible. This has now been replicated by any number of schools from the elementary all the way up through the collegiate level, as I mentioned. And this could be something you do, maybe not for students, maybe it's teachers that you provide these tools so that you can generate that content on your behalf. One way or the other, your social profiles are only as good as the content that's within them, and it's only as good as the engagement that you do. So you've got to be able to get that content from places. You've got to be able to give that experience and show off your school in really unique ways, and this could be one way that you do that. So some specific charter school examples to look at. Again, this is some video content that we've seen from Success Academies. Video, again, is vitally important given the growth around video itself and the fact that you're seeing all of the social networks put a lot of importance on video. I don't know if you've been on Facebook or any one of the social media networks in the last few months or few weeks, but you're seeing more video content than you've probably ever seen before. And video content is really being rewarded quite well. Now, it can be as professionally produced as this, or it could be an example like this, what we call an animated or sketch content, right? This comes from great schools. You can do things like this to show off different feature sets of your school, leverage colleges and training programs that may be looking for opportunities to develop this content on your behalf. Or it can be as simple as things that you see like micro content or little short stories or internet memes like Highmark Charter School here that's showing off the mannequin challenge, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be pretty, but it's tapping into those unique opportunities. And you can see Highmark got, at the time of taking this particular video, had received 388 views on that video. Columbus Prep sharing off what looks to be a very chaotic Friday dance scene inside their school. Again, this is not highly produced. This is just using a phone to show off what's happening within their schools on any given day. Another thing you can do is infographics, right? And taking those infographics and being able to split them up and using tools like Canva to show off maybe enrollment numbers, to show off different things that may be happening within your school. This is just one example that we utilize for Charter School Capital, where they've got sort of a page that shows off all the sort of state of charter schools, and then you're able to break that up into pieces and pull off all those different nuances and utilize those individually within social media. So those are just some examples. So a little wrap up for you. We obviously appreciate the time. Kim, do we have questions that we want to address?
We've been addressing them all along, so I think we're good. One attendee actually, not a question, but followed along on the Canva topic when we showcased Canva. Apparently, there is a free option for nonprofits for their work version and a team for up to 10 people, so that's a great ad for schools that want to check out Canva. And then just looking at, there was another question back when we were talking about great schools as one of the sites that, the search sites that schools should look at. Someone asked about niche, which I don't know if you've heard about it, Michael, but it is a competitor of sorts to great schools. They catalog data about neighborhoods and schools and colleges and universities. So the question was, what are we hearing about that resource? I don't know if you've heard anything, but as far as I have seen, there's not a lot of talk about niche, so I'm not sure how many users they have, but I know Great Schools is one that is, is probably the leader in that space right now.
Got it. Well, we'll certainly take a look at it and provide some insights the next time. I had not heard of it yet.
Yeah. And then there was a question asking about social media guidelines. So I thought that was a really good question. We're happy to share some of the guidelines that we've seen used out there. So maybe that's something we'll post to our blog, or we can send out to attendees some resources on that end.
For sure, yeah. There's a variety of, this is a really interesting topic and probably one that deserves a lawyer to be included on this conversation, as well as we could get a whole hour or two. There are many public examples of what schools are utilizing to do guidelines, both at the administrator, teacher, and student level. I would encourage you to do some simple searches through Google to find good examples of those. And maybe something that we can point people to with a follow-up from the slides and the recording as well. But again, that's something that you're going to want to talk to, either your school's attorney, something along those lines, so that they're drafted appropriately, because this can vary state by state in terms of what you can and cannot allow people to do.
Yeah. Another question that came in was regarding data. So, how can a school keep the data in terms of who's using their social media platforms? And then an add-on to that is, can they track the purpose for visiting those platforms? So, the broad answer is yes, you can track the analytics. I think the deeper dive in terms of who, I think, depends on the platform itself and what is it you're trying to track. Do you want to add on to that, Michael?
Yeah, so for those who may not have understood what Kim mentioned, the analytics, those are kind of your metrics or your data that is happening on your website, as well as there are analytics on any one of the social media profiles once you log into your account that'll show you things like followers and how many people look at your content and how many people share that. I would say for schools that really care about those insights is to look for tools that are out there that can help make these into dashboards. Google Analytics is certainly one of them. There's a number of different third parties that'll pull in all your data from all your different social profiles and show the impact that it's having on things like your website traffic. If you are a sophisticated enough school to be able to track these things, there are a variety of really key ways that you can, append URLs so that when someone comes from a piece of content that you may have shared on social, that you get tracked, that person gets tracked through, and you're able to say, okay, this is what drove this particular website conversion or registration or opportunity to connect with a parent. There are a variety of different tools out there, and we can certainly add on to the follow-up from the webinar with those tools.
I think that's it for questions. I'm just checking to see if there are any last-minute ones.
Yep, and if anybody has no questions, both and my contact information is currently listed on the website. Please feel free to reach out to us via phone, email, or Facebook or Twitter if you'd like. All of that contact information is on the screen right now.
And for those of you who are on the call with us today who are in California and are attending the California Charter Schools Conference, Michael and I will be presenting a breakout session on student enrollment marketing. So different topic, but it certainly will include some of the social media that we've discussed, but definitely focused on student enrollment marketing. And so if you're going to be at the conference, join us for our session.
Yeah, we're also doing a poster session, which is very much more informal on social just itself, and will allow us to get a lot more hands-on. So if you've got questions of like, how do I manage these things? How do I set up a profile? How do I use this? I'm totally new. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me, help me, help me, help me. We will also have a poster session. I believe that poster session is Tuesday. Correct me if I'm wrong. The 21st?
I think the poster session's on Wednesday and our student enrollment session's on Tuesday, but we'll get that information out to the group.
Yep, and you're more than welcome to come by for any of those beginner all the way up to advanced questions, and we can have a hands-on conversation, log into your profiles, take you into things that you may not have been aware of. We're happy to do that too. We're also happy to do that for anybody that's not in California. Should you have any questions, happy to follow up via email or phone as well. Anything else?
I think that is great. I really appreciate everybody joining us today. I want to thank you all for staying on with us. We ran a little bit late, but really good content. And thank you, Michael, for joining us for today's presentation.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate everyone that stuck around past our top of the hour.
Hope everybody has a great day.
Take care.